gone through the first 5 segments, and now we're into questions and answers. So if you felt like you've taken a drink out of a fire hose, we have. And Isaac, before I move on, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, other than insisting that people go and check out these natural laws. Again, that was
yes.
DNAlife-laws.com. You're going to learn something, I guarantee you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Isaac. That's absolutely correct. There's so many of them. There's videos up there. There's tons of free resources. Again, this was developed over many, many years, over 40 years, and there was millions of dollars that were actually poured into this over that period of time in order to develop the system that you see in front of you. It's absolutely tremendous. The free stuff is going to blow your mind. There's other segments in there that if you want to take a course, like Cheryl said, for the DNA for People, it's totally worth it. But that's up to you. Understand, we're not selling you anything. We're not making you buy anything today. This is a free seminar. We're paying it forward. But remember, too, we've also got a fundraiser going on, and that is raising money for kids at risk and single moms. Our goal today is $2,000, and we've had a really generous matching gift of $1,000 toward that $2,000. So your $10 is like $20. Your $100 is like $200. So that's really important to pay it forward, because when you pay it forward, you actually have skin in the game, and now you know that you're doing something that's worthwhile, that's exciting, that makes a difference in other people's lives. And we want you to be part of this team because we know how important it is. So let's go into our next segment of questions and answers. And we have, of course, I'm going to give the text number to you again if you're online. You can text at 630-386-5306. Again, that is 630-386-5306. And we're into our segment about questions and answers. Is there anybody? Go ahead and do that. In the meantime, I'm going to ask any of the speakers, any of the people that are online that are on a conference call, you can chime into our conference number via phone, and you can ask it live. So I'll just open it up, whether we have Ed or Lise or Cheryl or Brandon or Isaac or Katrina, anyone who would like to ask a question. I'm just going to open it up. Not all at once.
Kevin, this is Cheryl. Can you explain the chameleon personality better than I did?
Well, I think you did a good job. It's somebody who is, is when they're with people, they tend to be like the person they're with. So if they're with an analytic, they can actually mimic things that are in order. They can take things down a very progressive, detailed, slow process, and they're comfortable with that because they actually mimic. There's something in them naturally that allows them to do that. They can actually track with somebody else, and they don't feel a pressure like another personality, like an expressive would, to try and move the analytic, along the, path a little faster and a little more toward people. Because it's interesting with the personalities that we tend to like the people that we're like, but we tend to fall in love with the people that are opposites, okay? So the chameleon, what they do is that they're really interesting in that when they're with a driver, they'll move things fast. They'll be more people-oriented, but it's just going to be like, boom, let's get this thing. Whether it's task-oriented and they move fast. Task and they move fast. They can move fast as any other driver out there, but it's because they're with another driver. They draw on the energy of whoever they're with, and they're very excellent listeners at a very, very deep level. They pick up signs and signals and tone, and they're able to track with that. And they do it intuitively. They do it quickly. They do it flawlessly. So who they're with, it's like, oh, no, this person, if you were to ask, if 4 of these people who met the chameleon said, who is that person like? Oh, no, they're like me. And the other person would say, no, they're like me. And the other person's like, you've got to be out of your mind. They're like me. And the other person's like, no, I think they're like me. But they're like all of them. But they're the expressive. They'll have fun. They'll party. They'll get down. They'll play loud music. They'll dance around. They'll be goofy. And it's just perfectly natural for them to do that. And then when there was somebody who's an amiable, they understand about conflict with others because they pick that up. And as a chameleon, they immediately get very quiet. They immediately get very people-oriented. They immediately move very slowly, very intentionally. Again, because they're great listeners, they take their time with people. Because as we look at the grid that's in front of you right now, the analytic and the driver, which is the cube and the pyramid, anything north of that line is going to be task-oriented. It's task-oriented. If we move south of that line, we're going to see the amiable and the expressive. The amiable and the expressive, and that's more people-oriented. It's more people-oriented. Okay, so the chameleon can move in and out of that flawlessly, and they also understand that if they move left to that vertical line, and they're with the analytic and the amiable, that they're talking about moving in a slow manner. They're not moving fast. They're moving very methodically, and they stay in that pattern. By the way, if you're talking to an analytic, you don't give them 6 ideas right in a row. You talk about one idea and you say, does that make sense? And once they have buy-in on that, then you can move to the next segment. Now when you go to the right of that vertical line, the chameleon understands that you're moving faster, whether it's task with a fast task quadrant, which is the driver, which is the pyramid, or whether you're looking at fast and moving with people, and that's the expressive. So learning to be like a chameleon is actually a good thing. Understanding all the personalities and being able to move in and out of that helps you be a better communicator. Does that help, Cheryl, or not so much?
It helps a lot. To me, that would be the perfect salesperson.
Yes.
So yes and no. The weakness of the chameleon is that they're flexible. So their greatest strength is their flexibility. Their greatest weakness is their flexibility. And so, I mean, all 4 of the personalities, plus anyone can learn. Every one of the personalities is going to have strengths and weaknesses in sales. It's learning how to control our natural frequencies or our natural personality to maximize the benefit.
Mark, there was another question I'd like to see if I could direct it to you. So the question was, when working with an amiable driver, again, it's the lower left quadrant, which is the sphere, and the upper right quadrant, who is the pyramid, who's the driver. So we have an amiable driver. What is the best way to approach that person when you want to get them to try something new and unfamiliar? Again, what's the best way to approach that person when you want to get them to try something new and unfamiliar, the amiable driver?
So if they're amiable driver, that's very, very different than driver amiable. It doesn't seem like it's a lot different, but it really is. So if it's amiable driver, their primary energy is they want to avoid conflict. So that will be the thing that will motivate them the most. And so when we try something new, it often increases conflict in the short term, but it can reduce conflict in the long term, and we're going to have deeper relationships because we're trying something new. And so reduce conflict, have deeper relationships, that's going to be the amiable. And then there's tension the amiable driver has, because the driver personality has goals and they want to drive it, move things forward. And so secondarily, for that type of personality is going to be, you have goals and they're connected with people, and you have such a desire to help people to grow and change. Obviously, to do that, we're going to have to try some new things. So that's how I would approach it.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that.
I have a question for Alan. Is he available? Is Alan there?
Alan is not with Brandon and I now.
Okay. So the question I was going to ask Alan, 2 questions I was going to ask Alan, is one, is Alan is an amiable analytic amiable. And I've noticed in the last year 2 years, Alan's ability to move into a driver and expressive and move very, very quickly. I've also noticed that he's much more tolerant of conflict and things not being done properly in order. It's almost like he's somehow learned how to violate or overcome his, like, what's wired into him from birth. So that was the first question. Maybe next month, Kevin, we could have Alan as a guest, because I think a lot of people would be very curious about his journey on that. So that was one question, Alan. The other question I was going to ask Alan is, when we look at value of installing systems, that's really connected down into achieving our life vision.
Mark, you're breaking up. Can you repeat that one more time, please?
Sorry, let me jump to another phone here. All right. So when we look at the achieving our life vision and how that connects back into systems, I was going to ask Alan, how does generosity, giving, why is that important, one? And how do you, like with small children, so I have my 2 grandsons who are 4 and 2, and it's not natural for kids or people to want to share, and so they often don't, or give. Like there's something that is very hard for people to give. And so I was going to ask Alan, why is that important? And how do you help people to learn how to give openly? So maybe next month.
Yes, absolutely. 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 Are there any other questions while we have the lines open?
Yeah, this is Isaac. Mark, I thought I'd take a shot at the first question that you were going to pose to Alan. And of course, I'd be interested to hear what Alan has to say as well, but I believe I have a theory on how to approach that. So the ability of a chameleon to reflect another individual is something that is their benefit, but like you said, it's their weakness as well because they can become too flexible. But imagine that instead of harnessing the personality of another person, you actually harness that and then you reflect back on what the situation needs. So imagine that you have a situation that calls for a certain personality type, and you're able to actually reflect what is needed in that situation, rather than the individual people that are there. But of course, the individual people are where you learned how to harness and use those personalities in the first place. I'd just be curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a level 4 frequency as a primary, and then a level 2 frequency as a secondary. One of my partners is a level 1 and a level 2 frequency. And so, like, Comcast has just massively negatively impacted, this event today. And one of my partners was working with, Comcast, and so they didn't want to push them hard. They didn't want to, it's their job. There's outages. There's reasons for things not working, and the amiable and the analytic always kind of see those reasons. And so the challenge, Isaac, is that we want to see in other people, or in situations, data that supports our position. So I can't wait until this grows bigger and larger and larger, and there's thousands or tens of thousands of people on this, and that Comcast just gets absolutely inundated, with this. To where in social media, they just get the living daylights pounded out of them. Because their service, they're just pathetic. Just absolutely pathetic, and people don't care. It's interesting. I talked to a service guy a couple days ago from Comcast, and I said, "This is just continued. They're just continually doing this." And I said, what do other customers who have continued problems with Comcast do? And they said they go ahead and talk to somebody in, I think it was Pennsylvania, and they complain to corporate. So the challenge is all personalities, Isaac, are prejudiced, and they want to see the world through their own eyes. And so even when things aren't working for the level 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, even when they're not working for that personality, they still see the data to support their own position. It's why it's so hard for somebody to go ahead and change their personality, almost impossible, many would say. And I've only known, 2 people on the planet that have done it. And Alan's one of them. So finding out, I'm so curious, how has he been able to do what he's doing, and how do you help other people? Does that make sense, Isaac?
Yeah, it does. Thank you for that.
Do you know, Isaac, how many people in the world would be interested in talking to you and your parents?
Well, do I know how many people would be interested in that? I guess if I like to think if people like to get to know my parents, that they'd like them pretty well. So I'd hope that there'd be a significant number of people.
See, most actually would not be interested in talking to you and your parents unless they understood the value, of what it would bring to their lives. And so I don't know when your parents would be, be able to be interviewed, but that is something that every parent would be interested in hearing and listening to, even if the parent doesn't realize it. So I'm looking forward to that event. There are so many people in their 20s, Isaac, that think a certain way, that bring harm to themselves, others in their generation, and their parents. And their parents are who are typically in their 50s or 60s, the parents are deeply frustrated and don't know how to solve that. Anyways, Kevin, I think we're about ready to wrap her up, right?
Absolutely are. Thanks, Mark, and I want to thank all of our amazing presenters here, for Ed Kirch taking us through speed networking, for Cheryl helping us with the DNA for people, Brandon for the DNA for business, and Isaac for the DNA for life. Great job, everyone.